Ships sunk by United States Navy battleships during World War II. Starting with the attack on Pearl Harbor, the sea was dominated by aircraft carriers and not anymore by battleships. United States Navy carriers, followed by submarines, were mostly responsible for sinking enemy ships during the war. Battleships were used as air defense ships or as coastline bombardment ships. Still, some United States Navy battleships managed to sink enemy ships. The Naval Battle of Casablanca. During the Battle of Casablanca at the 8th of November 1942, the United States Navy fought a battle against the Vichy French forces. During this battle, the brand new United States Navy battleship Massachusetts was engaged by shore batteries, destroyers, a light cruiser and the incomplete battleship Jean Bart. The Massachusetts was tasked along with 2 cruisers and 4 destroyers to neutralize the shore batteries and the incomplete battleship Jean Bart. The Jean Bart was already damaged by United States Navy aircraft, when the Massachusetts placed 7 hits on the incomplete battleship and sank Jean Bart in the harbor of Casablanca. Shells from the Massachusetts that missed the Jean Bart sank the destroyer Le Malin, the merchant Isle de Wessant and the passenger ships, Porthos, Savoie and the Lipari. Also, a floating drydock was sunk by a shell that missed the Jean Bart. After the bombardment of the harbor, French destroyers and a light cruiser tried to attack the United States landing forces. The Massachusetts turned around and engaged these French ships. With help from other United States Navy cruisers and destroyers, the Massachusetts helped to sink the light cruiser Primauget, and the destroyers Milan, Fougueux and Boulonnais. The Second Naval Battle of Guadalcanal. The most fierce surface actions fought during World War II, that were fought between the United States Navy and the Imperial Japanese Navy, were at Guadalcanal. The waters around it were even named Iron Bottom Sound. One of the key elements of these battles was Henderson Field. The Japanese Imperial Navy tried to destroy this airfield once more. That resulted in the Second Naval Battle of Guadalcanal. Because many United States Navy cruisers were sunk or heavily damaged during the battles around Guadalcanal, Admiral Halsey had only his 2 battleships South Dakota and Washington available. Together with 4 destroyers, these 2 battleships were sent to defend Henderson Field. In the night of the 14th of November 1942, the battleship Washington made radar contact with a Japanese cruiser and a few destroyers. Both sides opened fire and the destroyer Iron Army was hit by several shells from the battleships Washington and South Dakota. Later that night, the Iron Army would sink. The following minutes, the United States Navy destroyers were sunk or heavily damaged and the battleship South Dakota suffered an electrical failure and was hit by many Japanese shells. This only left the Washington as an effective fighting unit. Guided by radar, the battleship Washington opened fire with her main and secondary guns on the battlecruiser Kirishima. The Kirishima was hit by several 16-inch and 5-inch shells and sank later that night. The South Dakota was repaired after the battle and rejoined the fleet. The Bombardment of Kwajalein. On the 30th of January 1944, the battleships Washington, Massachusetts, and Indiana and 4 destroyers bombarded Kwajalein Island. During this bombardment, the battleships were engaged by a shore battery and spotted Japanese guard ships in the harbor. While the 16-inch guns from Washington, Massachusetts, and Indiana silenced the battery, the 5-inch guns from Washington and Indiana sank 1 converted trawler, 1 Japanese guard ship and damaged 3 other guard ships. A few minutes later, the Washington sighted a small Japanese tanker in the lagoon and opened fire with her 5-inch guns, until the target wasn't visible anymore. After resuming the bombardment of Kwajalein, the Washington spotted an LST-type vessel anchored off Kwajalein Island and sank it. While the battleships Washington, Indiana and Massachusetts operated together as a bombardment force shelling Kwajalein, the North Carolina was part of another bombardment force. A spotter plane from North Carolina spotted off Roy Namur the already damaged Japanese merchant ship Eiko Maru No. 2. The battleship North Carolina opened fire with her 16-inch guns, placing 1 or more hits on the Eiko Maru No. 2 and sinks it in the atoll. Operation Hailstone. After United States Navy aircraft from carriers attacked Japanese shipping at Truk on 17 February 1944, several Japanese ships were spotted trying to escape. One of these ships, the training cruiser Katori, was hit by a torpedo from United States Navy aircraft. Although aircraft could have finished off Katori, Admiral Spruance wanted a surface engagement. Spruance took two of his battleships, the Iowa and the New Jersey, along with cruisers Minneapolis and New Orleans and the destroyers Bradford and Burns, for a surface sweep around Truk. Several hours later, these ships spotted the training cruiser Katori, the destroyers Maikaze and Noaki, and the submarine chaser Shonan Maru. New Jersey's 5-inch guns and the cruisers Minneapolis and New Orleans sank Maikaze and Shonan Maru. The Iowa sank Katori with numerous 16-inch hits from her main battery. The destroyer Noaki escaped, although being lightly damaged. The Marianas Campaign. During the Marianas Campaign, United States battleships were tasked with bombarding Saipan and Tinian. On 13 June 1944, the battleship South Dakota bombarded the area around Tanapag Harbor on the island Saipan. During this 6-hour-long bombardment, the South Dakota sank two small transports in Tanapag Harbor. The Bombardment of Toulon. After being scuttled in 1942 in the harbor of Toulon, to prevent it from falling into enemy hands, the French battlecruiser Strasbourg was raised by the Italians and fell into German hands, when Italy surrendered in 1943. On 18 August 1944, 36 American B-25 aircraft dropped bombs on the immobile battlecruiser Strasbourg and the cruiser La Galissonière, which was next to the battlecruiser. La Galissonière capsized and sunk, while Strasbourg was damaged by 7 bombs. The next day, on 19 August 1944, the battleship Nevada was ordered to neutralize the battlecruiser Strasbourg. The Nevada straddled and hit the Strasbourg and retired, when spotters signaled that Strasbourg was sunk. Battle of Surigao Strait. During the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the United States invaded the Philippines to liberate it from the Japanese. The Imperial Japanese Navy would try to attack the landing area by luring away the main American covering forces with a decoy fleet. One of these two Japanese forces was the Southern Force under Nishimura. The Southern Force consisted out of the battleships Yamashiro, Fuso, the heavy cruiser Megami, and 4 destroyers. This Southern Force was met by Jesse Oldendorf's United States Navy battleships West Virginia, Maryland, Tennessee, California, Pennsylvania and Mississippi, 4 heavy cruisers, 4 light cruisers, 28 destroyers and 39 motor torpedo boats. 5 of the 6 battleships that Jesse Oldendorf had been sunk or damaged in the attack on Pearl Harbor and repaired, except for Mississippi. While Nishimura's ships passed through Surigao Strait, they were first attacked by motor torpedo boats and destroyers that sank the battleship Fuso. Then the West Virginia opened fire on the Yamashiro, followed by Tennessee and California and eventually Maryland. Mississippi only fired once and Pennsylvania remained silent. The battleship Yamashiro was hit by several 16-inch and 14-inch shells from West Virginia, Maryland, California, Tennessee, and possibly Mississippi. The burning wreck of the Yamashiro was then hit by a torpedo from the destroyer Benin and sank within minutes. Of the United States battleships mentioned in this video, you can still visit the battleships North Carolina, Massachusetts, Iowa and New Jersey, since they were preserved as museum ships.